Hello, good day, good evening, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you are, and welcome to VoN with me, Thomas Sheridan, which stands for the velocity of now. And there will be a lot of velocity of now because I'll probably be pumping these VoNs out a lot because of we got a front row seat to the end of Western civilization, don't we? I mean, we always knew weird things were going to go down eventually. Any of us who were paying attention over the years outside the mainstream, we always knew that something like this was coming. It was a given that we were going to have to deal with something like this. But the sheer strangeness of it is something I definitely wasn't expecting. And it's been going on a long time, you know. I can remember about 15 years ago, some of the people from UK column, Brian Gerrish, I think in particular, were on Theo Chalmers' show on the old Sky 200 controversial TV. A TV, I think it was On the Edge, I think the show was called, or something like that. I was actually on that show myself a few times with both Ian O'Crane, my friend, and Theo Chalmers. And it was filmed in Milton Keynes in the middle of England, well, Buckinghamshire. And they had a studio in this kind of like industrial estate. But I remember I was watching Brian Gerrish and he was talking to Theo Chalmers. And it was around the time that Brian was talking about I can't remember what it was called, the name of the organization, but it was basically designed to Common Purpose, that was the name. It was basically designed to reformat society by putting these, what they call thought leaders, into the civil service, into the newspapers, into so on. And this all probably originated with the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission was basically the Rockefeller concept that politicians were no good at running the world the way the big business wanted it. And so they created this trilateral thing where it basically has brought us to where we are now today, what they call stakeholder capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism just means that the ones who have the most money are the ones who run the world, which is actually fascism under the truest term of the truest meaning of the term. It's rule by corporations, fascism. And that's what they believed. Now, one of the things that Brian said in that show, and this is probably about 15, 16 years ago, maybe longer, that he said, it always stuck in my mind. And he says, do you ever notice how things don't work anymore? Nothing seems to work. And then he talked about, like, nothing does seem to work. Things that should be simple, everything from health services to public transport, everything is burdened by a myriad of complications that were never there before and all seem to have been introduced at the same time to make it as difficult as possible. Coupled with that, you had all these strange modern art installations going around that didn't seem to make any sense and nobody wanted. And the whole thing was to sort of like make you feel uncomfortable. This is my theory. Make you feel uncomfortable in society. What is this place? I don't recognize it anymore. You know, nothing works. The buses don't show up on time. Nothing happens. The strange sculptures and statues all over the place. Well, that was what we're at today on the macro level. They had to soften us up in the small towns, in the cities, in the communities, in the countryside, in order for the big one to be unleashed. And tonight I want to talk about the latest Epstein thing that's come out. Now, I swore the other day that I was finished with it, that this is just wiki. Well, it's still true, this, but I want to give a bit more input into it because something that happened. But my attitude was, this is just WikiLeaks Part 2. You'll get all kinds of files and batches and all this kind of stuff, Rob. All the people will trawl through them looking for stuff. And like WikiLeaks, they won't really find anything. And even if they do, like WikiLeaks, after all the thousands of the batches of documents, all the drops, millions and millions of pages, what did we discover? War is bad, something we already knew. I mean, it was just like a platitude. That's all WikiLeaks ended up in, a singular platitude. It reminds me, I saw like something from the Grammys the other day, and they had some stupid singer or something, and he was saying something like, "We can't have any hate," talking about the ICE protest and all the ICE things in America, and he goes, "The answer to hate," and then he pauses, "is love," and then the audience are like, "Oh, profound, profound," like just like so twee, so cliched, but announced in such a way that it was so profound. The answer to hate, it, pause, is love. Oh, the standing ovation. Oh, this kind of thing. All this head case stuff, right? But so that was the kind of the attitude. That's what WikiLeaks was. It was nothing. It was marketed with a whole sense of profound meaning, and in the end, all we got was, well, war is bad, and that was the end of it. Nothing else. Nothing else. And something we already knew, like the answer to hate is love, like something we already knew. So my attitude was, and still is, a lot, but not exclusively, to the Epstein latest batch. Now, that I was looking at, that's the end of that. I'm not really interested. It could be anything, and we must always bear in mind that the arbiter and the actual editor of these batches is the Central Intelligence Agency. Remember that. Remember that. Everything that's in that is basically a product of the Central Intelligence Agency. Either it was witnesses' testimonies, who are always given as being anonymous or as being pseudonyms, uh, and the Central Intelligence Agency. So you cannot trust anything in the Epstein files to be the truth. I'm not saying it isn't, and I know some of you who are nonce maniacs who like are obsessed with anything like noncy, would be, the fifth thing split in your mouth right now would be cascading out in slow motion. But it's true. It's a Central Intelligence Agency is the arbiter, editor, and disseminator of this information. They decide they're God when it comes to this documents. They redact it, they let out, and they've let out 3 million files so far, and there's another 3 million to go. Funny, it's always 6 million. Do you ever notice that? You know why it's always everything that's any kind of like sense of danger to it? It's always 6 million because they used the number for the Holocaust as the ultimate bogey number. It's actually more commonly used as a kind of a signal than 33, like with the Freemasonic kind of cliched number. They always, like, I remember years ago going to some kind of like class or lecture in New York given by some like local Wiccan ratbag. There's a couple of them there, and real weird witches stuff. And I thought I was going to learn something interesting. But she goes, "I want to talk about the burning time," and the way she said the burning time. I want to talk about the burning time. And then it comes out. Wait for it. I was like literally in my head doing the drum roll. Shh. Where 6 million witches died. Ching. Shh. She came out with that number. That's you've heard me talk about that over the years. That's absolute bullshit. There wasn't millions of witches born because they were, wise goddesses. The vast majority of people who were killed, and most weren't killed, most actually got a fine when you were arrested, took place in Lutheran and Calvinist countries for the most part, mainly Germany, Scotland, Scandinavia, and many of them got off with a fine, or they went to prison, or they got into trouble in other ways. Death sentences for witchcraft were not that common, and even if they were usually as a result of sectarian tensions. So they would just declare a bunch of Catholics who were living in the wrong area to be witches, or a bunch of Jews, or a bunch of Protestants in the wrong area, and they would like mass kill them, and then say, "Well, they're all witches. They're all witches." And so you have this rap bag today going on, "Journey of the Burning Time." I always remember when said the burning time. Like it was like so like meaningful, and most of the people that she was talking about would have went to their deaths devout Catholics or Protestants. You know, they were not like these Wiccan witches that these rat bags were trying to make out they were. Nothing like that at all. So, so I was watching that thing and I was going, 6 million. As soon as I heard like, oh, the 6 million files drop, I said, okay, psy-op coming, psy-op coming. You know, because because the 6 million number is so psychologically entrenched in people and society that they're everything bad or everything that's, they always say 6 million trees were wrecked in the Amazon or 6 million this, 6 million that. It's always that sick to drive it home. So I knew we were like dealing with a psy-op just by the number. 3 million now, 3 million later. What's a fucking, a deal, Roll on up. It's 3 million files now, 3 million files later. Well, yeah, it is fucking like that. It is like that. Because remember, we got a front row seat to this like circus sideshow. And we're lucky enough to be in the tribes where you can actually see kind of what's going on. Now, so, as I said, up until yesterday, I was like, it's WikiLeaks bullshit. I'm not giving it any more energy. And then this thing pops up in my videos of Steve Bannon interviewing Epstein. Now, I thought it was just going to be audio. I didn't realize it was going to be a video. And I kind of like fallen out with, I never fallen out, but I kind of had no time for Bannon anymore after it turned out that he was Epstein's PR guy and was basically working at trying to rehabilitate him. And I was like, well, he kept all that quiet when he was like on TV talking about the Holy Eucharist and the Angelus and his little Christian pictures behind him, didn't he? So I started watching the video at Epstein. Now, I don't know, look, I know some of you nonce maniacs will start thinking, oh, he's defending Epstein. It's like, no. This is my observation of watching this thing, right? I was expecting some kind of sleazo scuzzball like Bill Gates, where Bill Gates is clearly a piece of shit, or else a kind of like an autistic like scumbag like Peter Thiel. I wasn't expecting what came, and what came was literally this could be part of the trauma-based mind control thing. Epstein was articulate. He was interesting. He didn't come across anything like I expected him to come across. He certainly didn't come across anything like what Gates comes across and his missus. So I'm watching this, right? And I'm like, fucking hell. And I says, where, I didn't see the monster. So you start checking. Well, these psychopaths are fantastic at charm. But no, they're not. That's a myth that psychopaths are good at charm. Psychopaths are glib. They're glib and they flatter. And people who are very susceptible to glibness are susceptible to psychopaths. For every person that falls for the glib, superficial charm of a psychopath, there's 100 who go, what a fucking creep. But they only need one out of 90, and the other 99 are irrelevant. The classic being Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy we were told about how charming he was and how he picked up these women. And before he, put a welder's hammer through their skull. But there are lots of testimonies in the books of people who met Bundy and said they gave him the creeps. And they were nearly always men. Because Bundy knew exactly who his target was. Middle class, middle of the road, middle American women. People who work in the government, in the courts, in school teachers, nurses, these kinds of like sort of mainstream jobs at a time in America was full of like hippie freaks, okay, and this kind of thing. He was clean cut and he did have that $1 million smile and he wasn't bad looking and he used the combination of all those things to particularly manipulate these highly manipulative women who were looking for a kind of a mainstream man, the white knight thing. He played the white knight thing. If someone had something, like one time he pretended he had a broken leg and then he still held a woman's groceries. Always be wary of the white knight. But Bundy, in all his interviews, you see the asshole, you see the smirk, you see the shit-eating grin, you see the glibness and his attempts to flatter people. I didn't see that at all with Epstein. I'm being perfectly honest here. I did not see that. I did not see that. He came across as quite intellectual. Now, you could say it was pseudo-intellectual, but the way he spoke about these things, it didn't sound rehearsed. Yeah, I know the video existed to rehabilitate him in sort of ways, but, Bannon was a terrible at the interview, and towards the end, Bannon wouldn't let him finish. He kept constantly interrupting him. I don't know why. It's almost like, is Bannon rehabilitating him or cross-examining him? And the only thing that came across as flattery was he said, that's a good question, but that's a common thing for American school teachers. Anyone who had their school teacher, I knew quite a lot of Americans who used to say, oh yeah, Thomas, that's a really good question. That comes from their teacher training back in the day, where they were encouraged to say, it was a way of like building up the kids' confidence. So if the kid says, why did George Washington did that? And the teacher was told to say, that's a really good question. So that was a school teacher coming through. Now, he was absolutely right. Now, one of the things I was working in Wall Street when the subprime lending thing crashed. And the way he described that is exactly what happened. It's exactly true. Bill Clinton told the banks to give loans for homes for people to buy houses who are generally what they call low income or minorities, i.e., African Americans and Hispanics. And it was all a scam for the Democrats. Another one of these, just like they're flooding the countries with immigrants today. This is how the Democrats and parties like the left-wing parties around the world, they generate votes by buying them. It's the classic thing, They who have the democracy doesn't work because they use the treasury to buy votes, and that was what the Clintons did with this subprime lending, and the banks didn't care because they were all underwritten by the federal government, and that's what caused the housing catastrophe that echoed around the world in 2008. And I thought Epstein explained that very, very well. So here I am watching this guy, and I go like, he was built up to be this demon, and I'm expecting a stereotypical demon, and he's not at all. He doesn't come across that way at all. I'm not saying he's innocent now. Control yourselves. I'm just saying, on the impression of that, if he didn't have a prior reputation, and I watched that video, I'd be going, oh, he's kind of an interesting fella. I'd definitely talk to him. He comes across as fairly affable and interesting, and that'd be it. But because he comes with this sort of like this proviso, this mountain of shit, the unbelievable mountain of shit. I sat down last night after watching it, and I was like, literally was saying to myself, what in the name of fuck is actually going on with this Epstein stuff? Why is it being shoved down our throats? Why are we dealing with it? Why now, and what are the implications? Because I looked at that and I was so taken back by it. I was like, is that AI? Is that really him? Is that AI? Was he nothing like he's made out to be? But he was a fall guy, or maybe he was like a bit of a, he was with won a couple of underage girls, and I mean, I just don't know, okay? But all I know is like, I don't think we're meant to know the whole truth, but we're supposed to know everything, and that's what I'm going to get to tonight. There's a reason for this. So, yeah, of course we know that politics and the upper echelon is full of perverts. Even when the Council of Churches, whether it be the Church of England, the Church of Scotland, Church of Ireland, whenever they have their general assemblies, everyone will tell you that call girls and rent boys and prostitutes are in high demand with the delegates. Same with the Davos. Hundreds of prostitutes fly in for the WEF meetings. It's just a known thing. Now, it's not necessarily nonsense, child molesting things, but it just shows that these people, they definitely have an obsession with sex that's beyond normal people. They just do. We even seen that in people like Princess Diana. I mean, she was a goer. I mean, poor woman didn't deserve to be murdered or anything like that, but she was a flyer, that one. If she was still alive, we'd probably be finding out something about Epstein stuff with her, But, so I remember about 10 years ago, a story broke in England where a 14-year-old boy, the police had been called to a gay S&M party, which was full of mainly British politicians and senior civil servants. And at this party, a 14-year-old boy had died from rectal bleeding. Now, that's what was reported, and we never heard anything about it ever again. So, the depravity of these people is not hard to come by. It's real. So, yeah, they are like that. So, and we've also been conditioned to see them that way. So, there was almost like a collective yawn when the Epstein stuff was coming out. It was like, yeah, well, we know they're all a bunch of perverts and freaks and all this stuff. But, so I went from thinking to myself, I'm never going to have anything to do with this again. It's just WikiLeaks Part 2, to watching that interview. And I was literally up all night thinking to myself, what the hell is really going on? And I thought about it some more. Now, so I spent the day watching some other videos, and they have all these. Now, remember again, all these documents are being given to you by the Central Intelligence Agency. And if you believe them verbatim, you're a fool, because they're not in the business of telling the truth. They're not at all. So remember that. So remember, when you go, it says this in the files, it says that in the files, it must be true. No, it's probably a lie, or has some truth, but it's also coming from the CIA, so you will never know for sure. So always bear that in mind. For instance, the other day, someone posted a link on Telegram about how Bono was a nonce who kills African children for sport. And it was just, they had this this African woman going, I know him from my dad's records, and you like to kill the woman, you like to kill women, you like to kill young girls, And it was it was obviously a load of shit. And it was obviously bullshit, there was no evidence presented. But yet the video had 40,000 views in a couple of days, and the comments were filled with things like, Bono is a dirty, evil degenerate, blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And yet no evidence nowhere was ever presented to say to prove that in any way. So people have this thing, they put one and one together in their heads and they get 100. Or they skip all the letters and they go in the alphabet and they start at A and they end up at Z. They miss all the letters in between. Critical thinking is even worse among the alternative scene than it is among the mainstream normies. It's actually worse because it's driven often by sensation and hysteria and a need to know that they're going to be vindicated one day because they told everybody that all this stuff about celebrities and the reptilians and all this other nonsense, and now they're going to be proven now. So they're desperate to be proven. They're desperate to be proven. So there's lots of this wild distortion going on. There's lots of this wild hysteria going on. And this is part of the plan. You look at your social media feeds today, this is the one issue that finally unites left and right. Is Epstein's files. The one on the right all think that all the lefties are all in it and they're all perverts, and the one on the right, on the left all think the rights are in it and they're all perverts. They've actually been united. Okay, this is not an accident. This and all over the newsfeed, some of the groups I look at, anti-cancel culture groups, and there's bullshit memes there's loads of AI generated. So it's interesting how all this stuff comes about just as people have access to AI. So if they want to incriminate the mayor of New York, all they have to do is make an AI picture of him on Epstein's island with Ghislaine Maxwell's arm around him, and then he's there, and they all believe it. 90% of the people looking at the picture will believe it. 10% will probably say no, this is all AI. And you see this, they're all doing on all sides. And there's a wild witch hunt like hysteria that's being engineered on purpose to get people, both normies and the alternative people, wired up and fired up and like in a maelstrom of nonce mania and all this stuff. Okay? I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. My news feeds and social media pages and feeds are filled with hundreds and hundreds of bogus images, letters, about saying this and saying that. One tonight was Jimmy Dore the show from the Epstein files, and it absolutely it sounds scripted. Now it says, it was basically the story. It was like the Bill Gates story and trying to get antibiotics for his wife's chlamydia, or wherever it was, and or syphilis that he contracted on the island. You telling me Bill Gates can't go to his doctor and get this shit? He has to get it off Epstein. Now, and another one was that Trump. A document was that I saw tonight where Trump was said to have wanted to have sex without a condom, and when someone said, "What if she gets pregnant?" and they allegedly said that Trump threw money at her and said, "Why don't you get a fucking abortion?" Now, if that sounds like something that's made up, okay, I'm sorry, it does. I know some of you are desperate to believe the worst of the worst about these people in the top, and it's probably true, but I don't believe a lot of this stuff, and I'll tell you why. Because it often says underneath it, a name like is given, and it says not the real name, anonymous or pseudonym. So it could be a liar. It could be written by CIA agents themselves. It could be anything. And the reason for this is quite startling and quite astonishing, and has implications that go far beyond the nonce thing, anything. It ties in with central bank digital currencies, the rise of AI, the abolition of the democratic system. It's all these things together, but for reasons that are not blatantly obvious in terms of an actual policy, either fiscal, economic, or political. It comes down to one colossal and total psy-op, the likes of which the world has seen.